So what we want to do is cultivate a capacity for kindness. So, close your eyes. Take a few moments to breathe in and breathe out. So what we want to do is cultivate a capacity for kindness. So, close your eyes. Take a few moments to breathe in and breathe out. So what we want to do is cultivate cultivate a capacity for kindness. So, close your eyes. Take a few moments to breathe in and breathe out. Alrighty. Let's get started, chat. How y'all doing today? Okay, looks like, wow, so Twitch really knows when a hype train is coming. They can tell that it's, how can they tell? Oh my God. You're tired? I was feeling pretty tired this morning, but then I got hyped up about talking about tiredness. So, welcome to another Healthy Gamer GG stream. My name is Alo Kanoja. Just a reminder that although I'm a psychiatrist, nothing we discuss on stream today is intended to be taken as medical advice. Everything is for educational or entertainment purposes only. If y'all have a medical concern or question, please go see a licensed professional. Hype train goes. Let's do it. Runcool subscribed with Prime Gaming. Thank you very much. 9 months. We really appreciate it. So, we're going to get started today. So we're going to do something a little bit different. So I woke up this morning and I was trying to figure out, all right, what are we going to do today, chat? And I was thinking to myself, okay, like let's talk about tiredness. So we'll get to why we're talking about tiredness. Hold on a second. Hold on. I just realized, do we have there we go. And so I was trying to decide, like, okay, like, how can I talk about tiredness? Because tiredness is just, it's so big, right? What does it even mean to be tired? What does it mean to be tired? And so I was trying to figure out what to do about this. And I was trying to figure out, okay, like, so should I, like, do, like, a quick lecture? Like, should I do a lecture, first of all? And then what should I include? Should it be long? Should it be short? Should it be like a marathon? Like what should it be? Because there's so much to say about tiredness. And so after debating for a while, I just kind of feel like we're going to talk about tiredness today. We're just going to start talking about it. I'm going to kind of rant at y'all for a little while. I'm going to get up on the pulpit and I'm going to start talking at y'all. And we'll see where things end. So we're probably going to do questions. So if y'all have questions, just pop them into chat. I'll ask for questions at a couple points. But in order to try to make this useful, also to make it like, so that someone can come in the middle, we're going to sort of split up our approach. We're going to approach tiredness from 3 different angles, okay? And we may kind of like split them up a little bit more explicitly just to help us organize our thoughts and things like that. A lot of people will ask, will this be uploaded to YouTube? It'll probably be uploaded to YouTube, but sometimes on YouTube things need to be a little bit shorter. So we may try to do like, we're going to approach like 3 different angles. But if y'all are here now and y'all are going to stick around for like an hour and a half, we're going to do a deep dive into tiredness. Because I think honestly, that's what it deserves. Before we do that, we're going to do a couple of announcements. So our Right in the Fields event is going on right now, which is super cool. So y'all can go to healthygamer.gg/feels. And I think we're at the Empathy Lab stage of our Right in the Fields event. So for people who don't know, like we're doing this thing now where, you know, as long as our community team is up for it and not too tired, what we're going to do is we're going to do like something to help y'all make a more concrete change in your life and give y'all like a little bit more I would almost say like give you all a roadmap to improve one dimension of your life. So we started this stuff with stuff like touch grass, which is, like a chance for y'all to get outside of these four walls and go and do the things that we say that we should do. So that went really, really well. We also did a month around all about replacing unhealthy technology habits with like other kinds of habits, which worked really well. And what we've really found is that emotional awareness is really important for fixing your life and improving things. And why is that? It's because there's some weird research out there, right? So like I just saw a paper, which we've talked about a couple times, that if you do a multivariate regression analysis on pornography addiction, okay? So multivariate regression analysis, all right, maybe that's redundant actually, multivariate analysis. And you try to figure out, okay, what correlates, like what variables are associated with being addicted to pornography? It turns out that meaninglessness correlates very highly with pornography addiction. And so what tends to happen is we feel kind of like, oh my God, I have no reason to live. I'm not doing anything in my life. And so in that kind of state, it's easy to seek dopaminergic stuff. And how do we get out of that state? It turns out that becoming aware of what you feel, because when you go out into the world and try to do something, oftentimes we'll have emotions that keep us from doing stuff, like anxiety. Or sometimes we don't even know, right? We just like, I don't feel like it. I'm tired. And so it turns out that being aware of a lot of your emotions can help you start to make changes in your life. So that's what we're kind of focusing on for this 6 weeks is the Right in the Feels event, where we're going to teach you all a lot about emotions. And today we're going to be talking about tiredness as well, which we're actually going to treat as an emotion for a second. So we'll get into that. So if y'all are interested in that, I think Empathy Labs is live this week or going live this week. And Empathy Labs is exercises that we're going to do to try to improve our empathy. So we're going to look at, like, you can look at a box of text and then try to figure out, what do you imagine this person could be feeling? And so we're literally going to do word problems for empathy. So hopefully that'll help people. We'll see. Y'all are welcome to join up, participate. Other thing is we've got Ask a Coach going on after stream today at 2:30, and our focus today will be anger. So this is another thing for 6 weeks. We're going to have coaches hopping onto Discord. The last one was really awesome. I think we had Gatsby doing it last week, and it was great to hear her kind of talk about her understanding of emotions and how she helps people with emotions and things like that. I think there were like 300 people there or something like that, so it was really fantastic. So today we're going to be focusing on anger. And yeah, so now what we're going to do is let's talk about tiredness. All right. So let's start with this. Oh, I guess y'all can't see this. I'm going to turn this off. Camera off. Nope. There we go. So as part of our Right in the Feels event, hold on. As part of our Right in the Feels event, I'm going to quack like a duck. So we have this event going on right now where we're helping our community track their emotions. So here's all the emotions that people are feeling. What's the number one emotion that people are feeling? Turns out it's tired. That's the most common emotion that people experience. Now that may sound kind of weird to you, because is being tired an emotion to begin with, right? I thought being tired was like a state of energy. Isn't tired like a lack of sleep? So is it physiologic? Is it mental? Can you feel mentally tired, or is tiredness just kind of a physical perspective? What about people who, are not depressed or anything like that, aren't burnt out, and sort of take care of themselves, exercise, but they just kind of when they wake up in the morning, they kind of feel tired. They feel like life has no zest. There's no excitement. Is that depression? What is that? So what I'd love to do is talk to y'all today about tiredness. And what we're going to do is approach tiredness from a couple of different angles. So we're going to start by talking about tiredness as an emotion. So is it an emotion, and what does that even mean? Like, how's tiredness an emotion? And sort of related to that, the mental aspect of being tired. Because I know it sounds kind of weird, but if you really think about it, human beings all have the shared experience of being able to be tired, right? So like we can all feel tired. And if we all can feel tired, tiredness must serve a particular function. And if we really want to understand how to overcome tiredness, what we need to do is understand why we feel tired in the first place. Not in a sense to fix it, but what is the function of feeling tired? Which I know it sounds kind of weird, but we think about tiredness, especially in today's society, as purely a negative thing to get rid of, right? Energy is good, tiredness is bad. But we never stop to really think about, hold on a second, like human bodies and brains and subjective experiences exist for a reason. There aren't good emotions and bad emotions. They're just emotions, and emotions are just information, right? So even something like fear or anxiety is your brain's way of telling you to be worried about something. So then the question kind of becomes, okay, like what is tiredness for? Like, why do we feel tired? And the cool thing is once we start to understand that, we can start to see scenarios in which we feel tired, and then we'll understand why we feel tired in those scenarios and where it's really coming from. And once we discover where it's coming from, we can start to take steps to combat it, overcome it, or even sort of accept it as information. So first thing that I'm going to share with y'all is a story, okay? So I was working with a patient who hated going back home for the holidays. So really enjoyed having time off from work, but really, really hated going back home for the holidays. The holidays were just so exhausting. And it's not just being there. So this patient was telling me one day that, she got a phone call. And on the phone, like she picks up her phone, she looks at it and she sees, oh, it's my mom calling. And just the sight of her mom calling was enough to feel exhausted. She's like, oh my God, I can't deal with this again. And so let's stop and think about that. So first of all, you may find that that's your experience as well, that you feel tired, but you can feel so tired suddenly. Which is kind of weird, right? Because if we think about tiredness, we think about it as a lack of energy. And if I've slept a full 8 hours and I ate a nice, keto, low-carb meal, I shouldn't feel tired. That's what we tell ourselves, right? I shouldn't feel tired because we think about tiredness as a physiologic state. We don't think about it as an emotion. And then what we end up doing is we try doing all kinds of physical things. Let me try this supplement. Let me go get some vitamin D. Let me go do this thing. I'm going to cut out gluten from my diet because we cannot have the gluten, right? All kinds of stuff that we do physiologically because tiredness is a state of energy. And yet we continue feeling tired. And sometimes we even feel good about ourselves until you see the ping. Oh, it's your boss emailing you again at 4:00 on a Friday. And then how do you feel? You feel tired. So let's try to understand what tiredness is and why we feel tired, okay? So let's go through this. So if I see a phone call from, let's say, a parent that I don't want to talk to, or someone who's looking for money or soliciting donations. I don't know if y'all have felt this way. I feel this way, where I'm walking down the street and sometimes you see those people with the binders. You know what I'm talking about? Those people with the binders and a good cause. And they look at you and they try to make eye contact. And then they wave, right? And then you're like, oh my God. And then you feel tired. I don't want to talk to this person. I don't want to be rude with this person. I know if I talk to them, they're going to ask me questions that are going to make me feel guilty. So now I have a choice between losing some money or feeling bad about myself because I'm not making the world a better place. And all this kind of stuff goes on in your head in the span of 3 seconds, and you feel exhausted. So what's going on there? Right? How does that work? So tiredness is actually an adaptive mechanism created by your brain to help you avoid kind of useless work. Okay? I know it sounds kind of weird, But here's what happens. So like, let's talk about something like paying your taxes. So here's where I am right now. And I got to pay my taxes. And the workload from paying my taxes is so high that my brain looks at that and says, there's no way we're going to be able to pay our taxes today. We can't do it. The estimate of the workload is very, very, very high. And then what it does is it makes us feel tired. So tiredness is our brain's response to a perception of a high workload. So when we see a super high workload, what we naturally feel is tired. And you may say to yourself, but hold on, Dr. K, isn't that when you should have a burst of energy? Shouldn't we, if the task is really big, shouldn't I need a ton of energy so that I can complete the task? And I want to work on my taxes for 24 hours, and then tomorrow I will be done with my taxes. It'll be great. It'll be liberating. But instead, what you do is you feel tired. So let's think about that. So let's think about the situation in which our brain evolved. When there are things that have a ton of work involved, our brain sort of calculates, okay, this is going to be a ton of work, and it may not even succeed. So generally speaking, the more work that something requires, the chances of success are going to be lower. So if I wake up today and I say, okay, like, I'm going to become president of the United States or secretary general of the UN, that takes a ton of work. The likelihood of that succeeding is going to be low. I'm going to start $1 billion company. I'm going to start a company that's going to use teleportation technology and invent time travel technology. The amount of effort required for that is going to be very high. And generally speaking, if we look at what the greater effort is required for something, the lower the chances are for success. And so then how does our brain prevent us from wasting energy on low success probability things that require a high amount of energy investment? It makes us feel tired. Because what is tired? Tired is don't do it. Don't bother. Don't try. Stop. I'm not going to give you the energy. I'm not willing to invest this amount of energy for such a rare, difficult thing. Now, this brain evolved prior to the development of taxes, right? So now what we're sort of seeing is that this fundamental mechanism, which is like our brains evolved and they're like, oh, let's go climb to the top of that mountain. And you look to the top of the mountain and you're like, oh my God, that's like so much climbing. No way, dude, I'm tired. Forget it. So if you really think about it, what does tiredness do? It discourages you from investing energy in like really, really long-term questionable kind of things. And now the problem is that we live in a society where we've got stuff like paying taxes, which absolutely have to be done, but our brain doesn't know how to calculate paying taxes. It doesn't know how to say, okay, we're going to have to put in 4 hours a day for the next 10 days and then we'll be done. It's not actually how long it takes to pay your taxes, right? But if you think about how long does it feel like, it feels like it's going to take a really, really, really long time. And then even at the end of 4 hours of paying your taxes today, are you going to be done with it? Is it going to be finished? Other examples of this include writing a dissertation. I got to write my dissertation today. You can't write your dissertation today. It takes a year. Oh my God, that's so much work. I'm so exhausted. I can't even do anything today. So when our brain estimates that there's a very, very high workload with unclear chance of success or progress that's visible, it protects us from wasting energy into that thing. There's no point, if we're going to try to climb to the top of Mount Everest, there's no point in climbing the first 5,000 feet if we're not going to make it to the top. You know, because it's like, okay, like let's say Everest is what, 26,000 feet or 29,000 feet or something like that, right? And like, what's the point of going up 25,000 feet, turning around and coming back? There's no point. You didn't climb Everest. I went to go climb Mount Everest. Everyone asks you, what was it like at the top? And you're like, I don't know, I turned back. Right? You might as well not have gone. And so that's how our brain operates. It looks at this really far goal in the future and it's like, hey, let's not waste our time in this. Boom, let's flick the tired switch. And so feeling tired is actually an energy conservation strategy. It's a way to shape our behavior. It's a way that our brain is making calculations and then using emotions to keep us from making mistakes. the same way that it uses anxiety to keep us from making mistakes, the same way that it uses anger to help us lay our boundaries and not get taken advantage of by other people. It uses tiredness to keep us from wasting our energy. Now, the problem is that oftentimes we need to invest that energy, right? Like it's actually worthwhile. So if y'all want to understand tiredness, what I encourage you to do is start by noticing in your mind, what is the scenario in which I'm tired? Because it's sudden, right? It's like you see that like, oh my God, I don't want to go home for the holidays. My parents are divorced. I hate Christmas with divorced parents because no matter what I do, neither of my parents is going to be happy, right? One of them gets me on Christmas Eve and one of them gets me on Christmas Day. And at 11:59 p.m. on Christmas Day, I know that I'm going to hear the car come up. Parent is going to come and they're going to want me for the rest of the day. And so I've spent one night with one parent, and that was like sort of fun, but I knew that this was going to happen the next day, so I can't really relax. And then as I walk out the door, one parent is going to be tearing up, and the other parent is going to be like resentful and needy. They're like, come on, let's go. We're going to have so much fun today. We got to make up for all the fun that we didn't have yesterday. Let's go. Have fun. Let's do it. Man. And the thought of going home for the holidays, just the thought of it, of being in that situation is exhausting. The thought of going home for the holidays and telling everyone's like, little Alok, how are you doing today, my love? What are you up to nowadays? Oh, nothing, auntie. I'm still applying to medical school. I'm 26 years old. I have no money. I have no prospects. Failed a lot of classes. And I'm not really doing much. How are you? Your son just got a job at Google. Fantastic. You must be so proud. Exhausting. Right? So tiredness is actually an emotion. And that may sound kind of weird, but remember that emotions are not psychological things. They're physiologic things too. Our body and our brain are connected. Our mind and body are connected. So the experience of emotion, lumps in the throat, butterflies in the stomach, tightness in our chest, erection of the penis, is an emotion. Arousal, lust. You bet your ass that lust has physiologic correlations, right? That's an emotion. And so similarly, if emotions are both physiologic and psychological, and we experience a lot of tiredness in our body, why do we assume that that's physiologic, exclusively physiologic in nature? Why can't it be psychological too? Because tiredness is an emotion. We even use the right language. You say, I feel tired. It's a feeling. And it's our body's natural or mind's natural response to tasks that we feel are very, very difficult to accomplish. And so we say, don't even bother. Like, don't do the taxes today. You can do them tomorrow. Start the dissertation tomorrow. You don't answer the phone call today, right? And then what happens when you don't answer the phone call, by the way? What's going to happen 10 minutes from now? What's going to happen tomorrow? What's going to happen a week from now? What's going to happen a month from now? The phone calls keep coming, and they keep coming, and they keep coming. And eventually, maybe they'll stop. But even if they stop, you still feel exhausted. And that doesn't make any sense from an energy perspective because you didn't even do anything. You didn't even talk to anyone. You just hit the phone on silent and continued, unpaused your video game and kept playing. How is that exhausting? There's no amount of energy. I click buttons all the time. It doesn't tire me out. So of course tiredness is an emotion. Of course it's mental in nature. And so the next time you feel tired, think a little bit about okay, what about this is exhausting? Because it ain't the energy. It's not the caloric burning that my body has to do in order to turn the phone on silent. Right? It's not the calories I have to burn to listen to my aunt tell me about how their kid is so amazing. I'm just sitting there. I can listen to crap all the time. It doesn't exhaust me. In fact, sometimes I rather enjoy it. Have you heard of an audiobook? So it's not energetic, it's all emotional. And so then the question becomes, okay, like how do we understand this? So like ask yourself, right? Pause and notice, oh wow, I'm feeling incredibly exhausted. What is my body telling me not to do? Then the question becomes, why is my body telling me not to do it? And that's where the answer lies. To notice, first of all, there's nothing wrong with you, right? You may be totally fine physiologically, but that this is a signal just like all other emotions. Emotions are information from the body and the mind to you. And then as you start to ask, okay, this is a signal, like this is my body telling me not to do this. I feel so tired. Oh my God, this person wants to go out on a date again. This is the 5th date. I'm just kind of tired tonight. That's your body kind of telling you, hey, we're not that into them, right? It's a waste of energy. That's what tiredness is. Tiredness is a signal that there's a part of you that feels like this is a waste of energy. Since it's a waste of energy, we're not going to waste it. We're going to help you feel tired. That way we don't have to expend anything. And as you ask yourself, okay, does this feel like a waste of energy to me? What will this encounter actually do? How will I feel if I were to do the tired thing or the thing that makes me feel tired? How would I feel at the end of it? And now here's where something magical happens. You get to really get underneath the tiredness because your mind will tell you one of two things. If I spent 2 hours working on my taxes today, how would I feel at the end of that? If you stop and you actually ask yourself, you'd say, actually, I'd feel pretty good. Or your mind may say, oh, we'd still feel terrible because we have so much left to do. Even if you do 2 hours of work, there's so much left to do. Therefore, logically, don't start at all. Right? Because that's what our mind tells us. Just ask yourself, if I started on my dissertation today, if I read one chapter of one thing, how would I respond? And my mind would be like, oh, you read like one chapter of like 100. You have so much left to do. So let's not even start. Because we have 100 chapters to read. Don't even bother reading the first one. And it's like, what? And if your mind is telling you that, how the hell are you ever going to do anything? So that's when you start to really realize, okay, hold on a second. How is my mind making this calculation? And as you start to really understand, oh, actually, if I went, like, give you all another example, exercising. So if I exercise, how am I going to feel at the end of it? Am I going to feel good or am I not going to feel good? Because a lot of times the things that we feel tired doing, we actually feel really good when we're done doing them. It's like, hey, I made some progress today. Awesome. I exercised today. Awesome. And if our brain is telling us, hey, like you're going to feel worse after making progress, then that's the problem. That's when we need to start to think a little bit about, wait, hold on a second. How am I arriving at the conclusion that I'm going to feel worse after I do something that I should be doing and that I need to be doing? How am I feeling worse? And then you tunnel down into that. And as you tunnel down into that, you can make a discovery. Holy crap, my brain is actually disincentivizing me to making progress in life. No wonder I'm stuck. And if you do a good job, something magical will happen, which is that, remember, we said that the tiredness is a feeling that the brain evokes when it estimates the amount of work that you have to do. And it estimates that since we're not going to get there, there's no point in trying. It's an energy conservation strategy. But as you start to really understand, okay, if I do this, I'm actually going to feel good. As you start to take that end point and you start to like really be more critical of it, what you'll start to realize is that your brain actually realizes, okay, hold on a second, maybe this isn't such a waste of energy. And now we also see why certain productivity techniques work, which is taking a large abstract task and chunking it into pieces. Because if I have 100 chapters to read, that's a lot of chapters, but if my target today is 1, I have completed my target. Then it's not a waste of energy. Reading one chapter lets me finish one chapter. That's actually a pretty good trade. And then suddenly we feel less tired. In terms of like relationship stuff, it's also really, really, really important to understand this kind of thing, right? So when it comes back to visiting family for the holidays, for example, why do I feel so tired when I see this phone? And the reason I feel tired is because I know that this person is relying on me for their emotional needs. And I cannot fulfill their emotional needs. So what they're going to do is suck me dry, trying to feel fulfilled emotionally. And I'm going to feel drained at the end of it, and it's never going to be enough. Right? Because next year will come around and they'll still be emotionally needy. That's why you feel so exhausted. Because at the end of this conversation, I'm going to feel exhausted, and it's not like the calls are going to stop. In fact, they're going to start leaning on me more. So tunnel down. Ask yourself, what about this makes me feel tired? If I were to do this, how would I feel afterward? And that's really the answer to that question is going to be how you overcome tiredness. So that's kind of tiredness from a psychological or emotional perspective. Let's see if we've got questions. We'll get to vitamin D deficiency in a second. What needs to be clipped and shipped? What did I say? Getting I meant emotionally, right? We're talking about going home for the holidays and seeing your parents, chat. Come on. That was the scenario. Yes, it's like Dr. K's feeling tired all of a sudden. Absolutely, because you know what my brain is doing now? My brain is like trying to climb Mount Everest. It's like, here we are trying to help people understand the nature of tiredness. And we're going to climb 5,000 feet towards the top. And at some point, I'm going to say something that is sexual in nature. And then who the fuck cares about anything else we're saying? No, my brain is like, why do I even bother? It's actually a great example. Do y'all see that? It's like now my mind is like, oh, it's not worth, it's an energy conservation strategy. Right? No, I know y'all get the message. That's why I'm not actually tired. But I did feel that a little bit. Right? And Spring Crow's like, chat, stop sucking him dry. As if we need more scandals in the streamer world. So Hike With Me is saying, I'm so bad at estimating how long some things will take. That's a really important point. So the worse we are at estimation, the more likely we are to feel tired, right? And this is a fantastic point. So if we don't know how long things are going to take, it's really hard to do them. We feel so much more tired. And then what do we think after we're done? We're like, oh, that wasn't so bad. Actually, it turned out to not be as bad as I thought. And so all of that tiredness and that hesitation and that fear that we experienced for days or weeks or months turns out to be like, oh, we like misestimated. But remember that the tiredness is an energy conservation strategy based on our brain's estimate. And so what we find is that people who are not as good at estimating, i.e. not people, but when you are not as good at estimating, you are more likely to feel tired. And it's people who have done it a lot that actually have the energy to go. Like, simple example is like, let's say exercise. Oh my God, it's so hard to exercise every day. Oh my God, it takes so much energy. And people who do it every day, they're like, actually, not that bad. Right? And everyone talks about habit, which sure, there's habit at play here, but you have to still understand the fundamental function of tiredness. Okay? All right. Yeah, so this is great. So Rock and Roll is saying, Dr. K, I study chess. When I open chess books and see so many lines of text, I immediately feel exhausted. And I just don't want to go through it. I love chess, but reading is very exhausting, and sometimes I push myself and still can't make it. Exactly. Right? So when you open the book and you see all of the lines of text, so what are you thinking when you open the book? Is the book Mount Everest that you have to climb? We have to get through all of these lines of text. As long as you're thinking that way, you're going to be tired. Why are you studying chess in the first place? Like, what's the point of studying chess? What we tend to find is that the energy investment is the same for two people. I see this a lot with medical students. I'm so tired of studying. Why are you studying? To get good grades. Why do you want good grades? So I can go to a prestigious residency in a specialty where I get paid a lot, so I can make lots of money. Why do you want lots of money? So I can live an easy life and not have to work. And so then we get confused, like, wait, why can't my brain and body work really hard to not have to work? No wonder it's tough. Because your goal, your actions are actually completely contrary to your goal. Right? Like, I want to work really hard so I never have to work again. Like, what? How are you expecting that to be a successful motivation strategy? I'm going to spend all my time being alone so that I never feel lonely. Like, what? That doesn't make any sense. And then we like struggle. We're like, oh my God, what's wrong with me? Let me take a supplement. That'll help. So what's the goal here? Like, what are you actually trying to accomplish? And the more that you start to, this is almost like getting into the spiritual aspect of it. So we'll get into that in a couple minutes. But like, do y'all see like how nonsensical that is? I want to work really hard for the next 20 years of my life so that I never will work another day. It's like your brain is going to be super confused by that. Because you're like, no, we're going to work hard. And your brain is like, why? Because we don't want to work. And your brain is like, wait, we don't want to work, right? I can get on board with that. I'm a lazy mofo. And you're like, yeah, never going to work a day in our life. Our brain's like, sweet, let's do it. And then you're like, start working. Your brain is like, wait, what? I'm confused. I thought the goal was to not work. And you're like, that is the goal. You have it right. And so you want me to work for how long? 20 years, 25 years, 30 years. You to slave away. Just sacrifice your happiness so that you can be happy later. Give it up now so you can get it later. Okay. Okay, Durable Florp is saying, so outside of finding work that is really meaningful, what is a good strategy trying to find an efficient way to work less? That's a great statement, question. I'm going to actually just copy pasta it and get to it in a little bit, okay? Notepad chat. Sweet question. Okay. Yeah, Chillin' Homie 852 is like, never realized how contradictory he is. Yeah, like, it's wild. So here's the thing. I'm going to toss something out that's like really, really strange. So most of the stuff that your brain does, unless there's actually some kind of pathology, most of the stuff that your brain does is for a good reason. And most of the stuff that we try to do when we set goals for ourselves and our brain doesn't comply, like we're like, how do I get this stupid organ to do what I want? And like the organ isn't the stupid one. The brain is doing what you're telling it to do. It's doing the best it can. The stupid one is you, right? It's the goals that you set for yourself. It's like our heart does what it's supposed to do. Our stomach does what it's supposed to do. It does the best that it can, given what we provide with. Our brain's no different. Yeah, so people try to beat their brain into submission. You know, so Kevy Wevy is saying, beat my brain into submission. You know what happens when someone beats their brain into submission? Heart attacks. I've seen it. Because your body's like, hey, we should stop this at this point. And our brain is like, hey, this doesn't feel good. And you're like, no. You do what I tell you to do. You work more. Play harder. Work harder. More. We beat our brain into submission. And then we have heart attacks. So this is kind of weird, but just anecdotal evidence, okay? So I don't have like data to support this. But I've noticed that the more willful someone is, the more likely they are to have a heart attack at a younger age. The youngest people I've seen who have heart attacks, aside from people who have genetic, very high risk factors, like some people have cholesterol metabolism issues and things like that. Aside from people like that, or people who have hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, and so they don't have heart attacks, but unless you've got like a real pathology going on, generally speaking, the more headstrong you are, the earlier I've seen people have MIs. And it's just because you beat your body into submission. Beat your brain into submission. Okay. What do we do? What do you do? You start by noticing, right? So everyone's concerned about doing. Everyone's like, oh my God, what do I do? And here's the wild thing. The more we emphasize doing, like everyone's asking, like, what do I do? If I Google search right now, 5 tips to not beat my brain up, you'd find something, right? Success manifested Shakti.org.co.in. 5 ways to whatever the scenario is. Everyone's looking for solutions. No one's paying attention. Even if you think about someone who looks for solutions, right? What do? We look outside. Oh, like this person, like this is the answer. Here's the answer. It's out there. It's out there. It's out there. It's out there. And we have so many solutions on the internet, chat. So many of them. There's so many out there. And yet somehow, shockingly, all of the world's problems are not fixed. You could even argue that some of them are getting worse. So start by noticing. Notice. Awareness is actually way more important than doing. Because something weird happens. When you start to become aware of things, it automatically changes your behavior. Right? If I give a 5-year-old a pail that has a hole in it, and I tell the 5-year-old, go fill up the water. You want to go build a sandcastle? Here, go get the water from over there. The 5-year-old goes, fills up the pail, starts to walk back, the water pours out. By the time they get to whatever sandcastle they want to build, the pail is empty. So what's the solution? Go get more water, right? So they go back and they get more water. This will keep happening until the 5-year-old realizes that there's a hole in the pail. And then the 5-year-old will naturally fix the problem. You don't have to teach them what to do. Right? They'll plug the hole. Or they'll use a different pail. Right? They'll figure out whatever the solution is. So then like people ask, what's the solution? Is it to plug the hole or get a different pail? Who the fuck cares? They both work. And then what happens is we look at other people and we're like, wow, look at that guy, like he plugged the hole. That's so brilliant. And so then you try to duplicate their solution. When your bucket doesn't have a hole to begin with, your tap is dry. But that's how that person built their sandcastle. They plugged the hole, so that's what I need to do. Or you look at other people who grabbed a second pail. because their parents could afford a second pail and they could replace it. They didn't need to plug the hole because they just had another bucket. And then we look at that person. And then we're like, well, I can't afford a second pail. And it's like, you don't even need a second pail. You just need to plug the hole. And so the more that we look to other, like outside of ourselves for solutions, we can find solutions. But just ask yourself critically, does finding solutions outside of me actually help? The answer is sometimes yes. Like you can find useful stuff out there, right? So like if your toilet is clogged and you look at a YouTube video for how to unclog a toilet, like you can watch that video, you can find an answer, you can unclog a toilet. So solutions have value, for sure. But sometimes what we need is not a solution. Or if you found lots of solutions and they're not working for you, what you need is more awareness. Y'all get that? Like, think about it as a problem-solving strategy. Does the search for solutions lead to improvements in my life? And then what happens is people are like, well, it hasn't worked yet. That means I haven't found the right solution. And they go on looking for solutions, looking for solutions, looking for solutions, looking for solutions. So then the question, like, hold on a second. Why are you looking like, like it's the strategy is wrong. And then people go and look for more and more and more complex and other kinds of solutions. And instead what they need to do is look in themselves. Small Fry Sunshine is saying time for a new strat. Absolutely. If this one ain't working, if at first you don't succeed, try it a different way. Everyone's like, try harder. Y'all see, that's like what's so sad, dude. Like we've got a bunch of people were talking about ADHD earlier. And it's sad because everyone's like, if at first you don't succeed, just try harder, especially if you have ADHD. Right? And then we feel tired. Because remember, what is tiredness? It's an energy conservation strategy. And when looking for solutions doesn't actually improve your life, how are you going to feel about looking for solutions? When someone says, hey, bro, or hey, girl, this worked for me, you should try this too. And when someone offers you a solution, you just feel tired. Why? Because it's an energy conservation strategy, because there's a part of your brain that's been like, we've tried 1,000 solutions and nothing has worked. How about we stop wasting our energy because nothing's going to work? Okay? All right. Let's do another segment. So, when we're talking about tiredness, we have to remember that there are different dimensions of it, right? So, tiredness can be felt sort of mentally, right? So, like you can sort of feel fatigued at the thought of doing something. Like if I want to like write a book, or if I want to, move, for example, that's like a really good one. It's like, oh man, I gotta move. And if you really think about it, like the thought of moving doesn't actually cost a whole lot of energy. It's not like you're actually moving. It's the very thought of it that makes you feel fatigued. But we do know that tiredness is not just in your head, right? We know that there's a lot of physiology that has to do with tiredness. We know that tiredness is a measure of energy levels. So for example, if I haven't slept in 24 hours, I'm going to feel really, really, really tired. And that has nothing to do with, whatever tasks I need to complete or things like that. If I eat a really, really heavy meal, I'm going to feel really tired afterward. And that's actually physiologic in nature. So now what we're going to do is look at tiredness from a different angle, which is sort of the physiologic angle. And this is oftentimes what people kind of think about when they're talking about tiredness. They kind of think about, okay, there's something wrong with my energy levels, and what should I do about it? And so what I'd love to do today is share with you all kind of like how I think about or organize looking at tiredness, like kind of within you from a physiologic angle, right? So how can we understand the physiology of tiredness? So a couple of kind of quick disclaimers or perspectives. So the first is that a lot of people will share or talk about basic science research as it relates to tiredness, right? So people will say things like, you can look at, like, let's say a study that looks at eliminating, let's say, refined sugar from your diet and how that boosts energy levels. You can look at studies that correlate things like vitamin D with energy. There are all kinds of basic science studies out there that will say this stuff makes people more tired, this stuff makes people less tired. These are primarily studies that are done in a laboratory. So the tricky thing is that for any one of those studies, it may not apply to an individual person, right? So for all those studies that show that, let's say, eliminating refined sugar from your diet improves tiredness, it doesn't make tiredness completely go away 100% in everyone in the trial, right? Some people actually get no benefit from eliminating sugar. Other people get some benefit from eliminating sugar. Some people get a lot of benefit from it. And so then what we do in science is we average all those things together, and then we kind of come up with a conclusion. So generally speaking, what I've found works almost better as a clinician is when you're working with real human beings. There are a bunch of different solutions, but trying to figure out, where do I start? Should I eliminate gluten? Should I eliminate dairy? Should I eliminate eggs? Should I do keto? Should I do intermittent fasting? Should I wake up every morning at 5 a.m.? Should I go swimming? Should I do resistance training? Should I do yoga? Should I do Tai Chi? Should I do Qigong? Should I drink this special kind of coffee? Should I add this supplement to my diet? There are 1,000 different things, and the answer to all of them is yes. You'll find someone out there who will talk about a paper who will say yes to all of those things. But practically as a human being, like, what do you do if you are tired all the time? So what I'd love to share with you all today is an approach to tiredness that incorporates all of that stuff. Okay? So when I think about tiredness, I think about two buckets. And this is what I've learned, like, working for years as a psychiatrist. There's the circadian bucket, and there's the metabolic bucket. And you may say, okay, like, what do you mean by circadian? So our body goes through various cycles throughout the day. We feel more tired at night. Some people feel tired in the morning. People have trouble getting out of bed. People have difficulty with sleep. So there's a lot of tiredness that has nothing to do with, like, metabolism, has nothing to do with energy, but has to do with cycles and sleep and things like that. By energy, I mean, like, ATP generation. I don't mean like the subjective feeling of energy. Because there's a lot of stuff that will subjectively make you feel tired and is kind of related to the circadian stuff. So this is where I think about things like sleep, daily cycles, like afternoon crashes, difficulty waking up in the morning. So this is the circadian bucket. So we're going to talk about all that stuff. In the metabolic bucket, we've got different stuff. Okay, so like, let's not worry about the sleep and stuff. But the other big dimension of tiredness and energy levels is what you put into your body and how your body responds to that. So this is stuff like, let's say, homeostatic balance and like blood sugar, nutrition, things like nutrient deficiencies. But there's other stuff going on with metabolism as well, like inflammation. And so this is where all the stuff of like, what should I eat? When should I eat it? And what effect does the food that I put into my body have? That's the metabolic stuff. That's completely different from like the circadian stuff. And so as a clinician, when someone comes into my office and says, I'm tired, there's also a psychological component or spiritual component. You may say, like, what do you mean there's a psychological component? Like, psychological component in terms of there's some tasks that just make you feel tired. It's up here. You just don't want to do it. And spiritually, like, some people come into my office and they say, I'm tired. And what they really mean is, like, I have no zest for life. Everything just feels like a chore. And then what happens is if they try to, fix their sleep schedule, like, that's not the problem. The problem is that, like, they've got nothing to look forward to during the day. They can take as many supplements as they want to, but that's not going to fix it because it's not a metabolic problem. So this approach is almost like from a differential diagnosis standpoint. What's the differential diagnosis of feeling tired? So it can be physiological, psychological, or spiritual. And then in the physiology of it, there's the circadian branch and the metabolic branch. So let's talk about the circadian branch. Let's start with simple stuff, and that is the pathology. There are all kinds of things that can mess with your sleep. So at the top of the list is sleep apnea. So sleep apnea is a condition that probably affects somewhere around 5 to 8% of people in the world. Shockingly high. Results in periods of cessation of breathing during sleep. So essentially what you do is drown or choke in the middle of your sleep. As you drown or choke, you don't get oxygen in. Then what happens is you start to drown physiologically. That's the best word, right? So you're not getting oxygen. So for 60 seconds, you're going to have like no oxygen. And then what it does is triggers a survival response. Rush of adrenaline. You kind of reset your breathing apparatus and you start breathing again. But the problem is that the rush of adrenaline and physiologic response is going to make you feel exhausted when you wake up in the morning, right? Because think about what's happening. Like imagine like if you were to get thrown overboard and were underwater for 60 seconds before you came up without a breath. Imagine how exhausted you would feel after that. People will have 20, 30, 50, 60, 100, 120 apneic episodes per night. And so physiologically, when you wake up, your body is ragged. That's sleep apnea. There are other things that we'll kind of talk about. There are other diagnoses that you can have. But circadian rhythm disorders are other examples. You can also have stuff like narcolepsy and stuff like that, but we're not going to talk about that. So circadian rhythm disorders are, I think, the other really, really big one that I think is actually quite common. And so what these kind of mean is if we think about a regular day, right? So let's say there's midnight, there's 6 a.m., there's noon, 6 p.m., and then midnight. If we think about the activity level, over time, right? So most human beings, their activity level is kind of like this, right? So you wake up at maybe 6, you go to work by 9, you kind of work until 6 p.m., you kind of wind down and you're asleep by midnight, let's say. Okay? Now the problem is that some people, their circadian rhythm is actually more like this. And so what that means is that they're very exhausted when the rest of the world is working. They're just, when everyone else goes home for the day, I'm just getting started. And between 12 and 4 a.m. is actually my maximum productivity. And so if your body's clock, which is what a circadian rhythm is off center from the rest of the world, and you force yourself to wake up at 6 a.m. like everyone else, this is your experience of life. Right? So like I want y'all to think about, let's use calculus and calculate area under the curve. For someone with a circadian, this is the total amount of energy that they have during the day. Compared to a normal person, this is the total amount of energy that they have during the day. And so you look at quote unquote normal people and you're like, wow, they're able to do so much. And you look at yourself and you're like, I'm exhausted all the time. I can't do shit. And that's because you've got a circadian rhythm disorder. And you can actually do the same amount. It's just you're jet lagged compared to society. So this is a circadian rhythm disorder. There's also all kinds of really interesting research. For example, the circadian rhythm of teenagers shifts later. So there's data that shows that if you start school at 9 a.m. or even 10 a.m., instead of, let's say, like 8 a.m., that teenagers will do a lot better because their circadian rhythm changes. Why does their circadian rhythm change? Because they're going through puberty and growth spurts. And our body physically grows while we're asleep. And I don't know if y'all have noticed this, but our body does a lot of growing when we're teenagers. Right? So there's even data that shows that schools that start super early for teenagers, those kids do worse in all kinds of different ways. Okay? So there can be circadian rhythm disorders. Now, part of the problem with circadian rhythm stuff, okay, so let's talk about solutions for a second. One is if you've got sleep apnea, the solution is actually medical care. Right? So there are these things called CPAPs, continuous positive airway pressure. There are different like medical devices that you can use that will keep you from having apneic episodes overnight. And so like you just have to get medical care for that. Like if you're worried about, okay, how do I know if I have sleep apnea? I can't sort of diagnose you all over the internet, unfortunately. But a really, really common sign of sleep apnea is waking up in the morning despite sleeping enough. So if you went to bed and you got like 8 or 9 hours of sleep, but you wake up and you're exhausted and it feels like you didn't get any sleep at all. You need 12 hours of sleep, 13 hours of sleep. That you should probably talk to a doctor about that. Another really common sign of sleep apnea is snoring. So what part of the reason that we'll become apneic is sometimes we have our soft palate and our like epiglottis and like some of the stuff in our oropharynx literally like clamps down and prevents us from breathing. So it'll like block our airways from like this oropharynx area. And we also know that, for example, having a lot of like mass around here, so if you've got like a really thick neck or obesity, can increase the risk of sleep apnea. So even weight loss can be a treatment for sleep apnea, depending on what the physiology is. Okay? So if you snore a lot and if you feel very tired in the morning despite getting a full night's sleep, public service announcement, talk to your doctor about it. And in the case of circadian rhythm disorders, things are a little bit more complicated. So part of the reason that I think we have circadian rhythm disorders increasing in our society is because we aren't quite as bound to the sun and the moon as we used to be. This doesn't mean like we're druids or we're no longer druids. This means that like literally we have, this is where all the blue light kind of stuff comes in. So blue light suppresses melatonin production. Actually, this is the right symbol. From the pineal gland. And then melatonin helps us sleep and keeps us on schedule, which is why people will use melatonin to adjust for jet lag. So what we've got is like, we'll take melatonin to help us get on a good sleep schedule. But here we are using blue light and technology that actually does the opposite of taking a melatonin tablet. It shuts off melatonin production. And so this kind of stuff, the availability of the internet, You may say, well, what do you mean by that? It means that at midnight, I want y'all to imagine 10,000 years ago, what could you do if you were a human between the hours of midnight and 4 a.m.? What can you do? You can't do anything. There's nothing to do. Everyone's asleep. But now we have all kinds of stuff to do. Stuff is available all the time. There are 24-hour eateries. We can get food brought to our doorstep. There are going to be some degenerate noobs that are queuing at 3 a.m. for whatever game you want to play. Right? And so there's all kinds of crap that you can do. And that all interferes with your circadian rhythm. It allows you to get circadian rhythm adjusted. Like you can become an absolute degenerate when it comes to your circadian rhythm. But it turns out that aside from these kinds of things, there are a couple of other things which people don't realize about circadian rhythm. So we're going to talk about that. The first is that your circadian rhythm is a natural cycle. Okay? And that there are particular times of the day where you're good at particular things. So this isn't actually what the circadian rhythm looks like. What the actual circadian rhythm looks like, it's not like this, but probably like this. So this maybe is like 9 to 10 a.m. This is noonish, noon to 3. This is like 4 to 7. And sometimes this is like 9 to 11. So if you actually look at our activity, and this should be flat, by the way, but if you actually look at our activity, we actually have like fluctuations in our activity. And this is conserved throughout the mammalian kingdom. So if you look at like the idea of a siesta or a nap in the afternoon, like even in some countries in Europe, like things will shut down around like 2 p.m. and they'll like open up again in the afternoon, late afternoon. So if you look at most mammals, like you look at monkeys are awake at like, 5 a.m. or even earlier. And then they kind of chill out around 10. And then they're like quiet during the hottest part of the day. And then around dusk, they become active again. Same is true of like gazelle and impala. So humans are probably the same way. There's even some evidence that, for example, cognitive activity between the hours of 4 and 6 a.m. is very, very like productive. So if you look at religious traditions across the world, they all wake up and pray or meditate at like 5 a.m. And why do all the religious traditions do that? Turns out that there's probably a circadian rhythm. There's like something about our mind is more at peace at that time. And the other really interesting thing is I'll work with some people who think they're night owls. And then I'll ask them, what do you mean? Like, so help me understand the details of what do you mean by you're a night owl? Well, I get started kind of sometimes around midnight, and then at 4 a.m., sometimes I'll like do my best creative work. I'll write music. Like I'll write prose, poetry, art, inspiration. Like it comes at like 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, which is actually consistent with our circadian rhythm. So it's not that they're night owls, it's that they're like morning people, like really, really morning people, early morning people, which is consistent with most of the mammalian kingdom. Another consideration for circadian rhythm, which a lot of people forget, is that we have these things called sleep cycles. So if you look at sleep, it's stage 1 to 4 sleep, and then we have REM sleep after that. But what people don't understand about sleep architecture, and so you basically go through these 5 stages, okay? The problem is that different stages of sleep do different things for us. So at the beginning of the night, let's say this is stage 1 sleep. This is stage 2 sleep. This is stage 3 sleep. This is stage 4 sleep. This is REM sleep. And at the end of the night, stage 1 is short. Stage 2 is short. Stage 3 is short. Stage 4, let's say, is a little bit shorter. And REM sleep is actually really long. So the longer you sleep, the more your brain changes what stages it spends its time in. So you'll actually go through a sleep cycle where you'll go through all 5 of these, and then you go through them again. Then you go back to stage 1 sleep. Now, one thing that people don't realize is that if you wake up in the middle of a sleep cycle, you will feel really groggy. And I don't know if this has ever happened to y'all, but you may find that's kind of weird. But like, if I sleep 8 hours, I will feel tired when I wake up. If I sleep 8.5 to 9, I'll feel really good. Or if I sleep 4 hours or 6 hours, I'll feel really good. It's easier for me to wake up with 6 hours of sleep than it is for me to wake up with 7 to 8 hours of sleep. Have y'all ever observed that? Like, it's really weird. Like, I'm actually getting less sleep, but I feel more rested when I wake up. And it's because you have to wake up during the right time of your sleep cycle. Then you won't feel groggy. But if you wake up during like the middle of your sleep cycle, it's going to be a mess. This is also why, and the progression of sleep staging is actually really, really important, because we know that, for example, a lot of the good stuff in sleep happens in REM. And to this day, if anyone tells you they know exactly what's going on in our brain in sleep, they don't know what they're talking about, because no one really knows. Okay? So, pay attention to your sleep cycles and recognize that you may not need 8. How did we get the number 8? 8 hours of sleep a night is what the doctors recommend. What they did is they took 1,000 people and they took these 1,000 people and they asked, okay, who here is healthy? And these 4 people raised their hands. And then they asked them, how much do you sleep at night? One person said 10, one person said 8, one person said 7, one person said 7.5. They averaged all these numbers together and they decided, okay, 7.5 is the healthy amount of sleep that you need. So this is really weird. If we use this system to make clothing recommendations, everyone would wear gray smocks that were like medium to large. We're like, okay, doctor, what should I wear today? And they're like, well, let me ask 10 people what they're wearing, average their sizes, average their colors, average their cuts. And that's the answer. This is how we do medicine. And this is how we do basic science research. We just average a bunch of people together, right? So when we look at daily caloric intake, how did we get that number? We got it the same way. Why is it 2,000 calories a day? Well, we just asked people who were healthy how much they ate. And now you have papers that come out that show that mild calorie restriction, like 1,800 calories a day, actually leads to better health outcomes over the long term. So it turns out that that number that we got by just averaging all the crap together turned out to actually not lead to the best health. Fascinating. Who would have thought that if you just ask 10 people what works for them and average it all together, that's not actually the right answer of what works for you. Okay? So be aware of waking up in the middle of your sleep cycle, and remember that one of the reasons that you may not be, you could be like tired from a circadian standpoint is if you're not getting enough sleep progression throughout the night. So we don't want to just sleep, with a low amount of REM sleep, but we can't, it's not like the first 2 hours of sleep and the last 2 hours of sleep give us different benefits. Now, a good way to transition to metabolism is by talking about caffeine. So what does caffeine do? Caffeine, the simplest way to describe what caffeine does is it suppresses adenosine receptors in the brain. So we have this thing called ATP, which is our basic unit of energy in our cells. And when you use up an ATP, you end up with an adenosine byproduct. So this is like when we have very high levels of ATP, this means that we have lots of energy. And we have high levels of adenosine, this means that we've got low energy. And then what we have is we have something that measures this. So we're measuring our adenosine to ATP. I'm oversimplifying. And so what caffeine does is it blocks the signal of low energy. It does not actually give us energy. It just makes our body numb to energy or the lack of energy. Right? So it's like the equivalent of like if we were taking medication that suppressed our hunger or suppressed our thirst, that's analogous to what caffeine does. So it numbs our body's ability to detect fatigue, which is why we feel more energized. But we're not actually energized, right? It also does other things like suppress appetite and things like that, which gets really interesting. So the key thing about caffeine is as we use caffeine, it's going to make us feel more energy without actually having more energy. Now, there are other effects of caffeine as well. So like it increases heart rate, for example. So it increases our pulse. So we get kind of amped up. You can sort of get the jitters with caffeine, right? So it does like all kinds of other things. But this is where a lot of people will combat this kind of stuff, like sleep apnea, with things like caffeine. So when I have patients who have sleep apnea, sometimes I'll ask them, do you feel tired in the morning? They'll be like, yeah, absolutely. And then I'll ask them, okay, what do you do when you wake up? It starts with 2 cups of coffee. I'm like, wow, okay. So now this person has 2 things going on. Not only do they have sleep apnea, but now they're blocking all of their energy signals. And then what happens is they don't actually take rest when they need to. So then they start running, their car starts running on empty, which creates all these other problems. So generally speaking, a lot of people like caffeine. There's some evidence that shows that a moderate amount of caffeine, which may have more to do actually with the other things in caffeinated beverages. So if you look at things like green tea or coffee, there are all kinds of like phenols and like other things that probably have positive health benefits. That a moderate amount of caffeine intake per day actually can be fine or even healthy. But what you've got to be really careful about is if you're tired and you're drinking caffeine, especially if you're drinking a lot of caffeine, chances are what's happening is that the caffeine is suppressing your body's ability to detect fatigue, and so you can't take care of it the way that you should. So as an example, caffeine also suppresses appetite. One of the reasons why people like it if they're doing intermittent fasting. If I'm using an appetite suppressant and I'm running on a caloric deficiency, that's going to cause my energy to crash. So we use caffeine to feel less tired, and we end up making ourselves more tired because of all kinds of other things. So let's move on to the next thing on metabolism, which is glucose balance. So remember, it's an appetite suppressor, right? So now here's what we got to understand about glucose balance. We've got 2 hormones, insulin and glucagon. There's basically a balance between these 2 things. Insulin is an anabolic hormone. What does anabolic mean? Anabolic means it builds things up. So when we have high levels of insulin, we've got a lot of available energy, and we're going to use that as storage or building stuff like cellular machinery. So generally speaking, when we're doing this process, our energy is not there to be used for activity. It's there to store away and build up machinery. If y'all play games like RTSs or, turn-based strategy games, insulin is like your expand hormone. It's like, okay, we're not going to build military units. We're going to boost up our economy. So we're going to invest our resources in having more resources later. But what this actually does is makes us feel tired. So insulin makes us feel tired and actually activates the parasympathetic nervous system. And what does the parasympathetic nervous system do? It rests and digests. This is also responsible for food comas. And now we're going to see a very common thing that we're seeing now more and more with the digital generation, which is I'm going to starve myself for a while because I'm drinking caffeine and I get distracted by technology. And then I'm going to get so hungry that I feel super hungry. I'm going to eat a ton of food. I'm going to eat like 1,500 calories in one meal. It's going to lead to a surge of insulin, and the surge of insulin is going to put me into a food coma. And then I'm going to feel really, 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 really tired. Okay? And now we understand how improper sugar balance can lead to feeling tired. Now, there are all kinds of other things to keep in mind here. Now we get to see a lot of why, a lot of the healthy things that people are touting, like how they work. So the first thing is a low-carb diet leads to low insulin levels. So the trigger for insulin is carbohydrates. So you can eat a ton of fat and protein and your insulin levels will still be low. What this sort of means is that if we don't have activation of the parasympathetic nervous system, people are going to feel less tired. So if you talk to people who are on ketogenic diets, they'll say like, yeah, at the beginning it was rough, but now I have so much energy throughout the day. My energy level is actually way higher and I feel way better. And why is that? It's all mediated through insulin. So now we can see why low carb or keto is pretty good. Next thing that we're going to talk a little bit about is, let's say, like intermittent fasting. So if you look at things like fasting has its own whole situation going on, but let's talk about that very quickly. So the first thing to understand is that we have glycogen, which is essentially our sugar stores, and they last about 8 hours. After we run out of glycogen, then we start burning fat, even breaking down protein. And then we're going to use these to generate glucose. We're going to make sugar because we've run out of our sugar stores. So for example, the brain requires sugar or ketones. It can't use other forms of it can't use fats. So we have to make glucose. And the thing is, converting sugar to fat is very efficient. Converting fat to sugar is very inefficient. It's like the efficiency of this process is, I'd say, less than 10%. I think it's like 1/16 or whatever that is. So it's like 6% efficiency or 5% efficiency, let's say. 6% efficiency. And so what that means is that when people we live in such a calorie-dense society that in order to be healthy, what we need to do is start really inefficiently burning calories. Like imagine for a moment what your life would be like if instead of needing 2,000 calories a day, you needed 12,000 calories a day. Right? Like there's if you were really, really inefficient, then you could eat all the hamburgers and crap that you want to. The problem is that we're not that inefficient. We're actually quite efficient, which means that when we eat 2,000 calories, we're going to gain weight. 2,100 calories, 2,500 calories, we're going to gain weight. So in order to counter that, what we need is some of these things like intermittent fasting. The reason that intermittent fasting is so good is because we run out of our sugar stores, and then for the next 8 hours, we're in this state, which is actually the first state of starvation. We're in the early stage of starvation. And we're burning fat very, very inefficiently to maintain our glucose levels. But this causes us to lose weight. And then we get to the third thing, which is inflammation. So when it comes to what to eat and your energy levels, there tends to be all kinds of crap that causes low-grade inflammation. So examples of things that cause low-grade inflammation: obesity, gluten, dairy, eggs, all kinds of minor food allergies. Now note that this is not celiac disease. Celiac disease is a true allergy to gluten. But there's even very, very interesting cases that I've worked with people who are like this, who will feel really, really bad if they're eating gluten. They cut out gluten. And then they start to feel more energetic and they start to feel better. They have more energy, their mood is improved, things like that. The really interesting thing is that there is one guy in Austin, Texas, who uses a strain of wheat that is 1,000 years old. So he's like somehow found some kind of wheat that is grown somewhere, or he grows it himself. And so this strain of wheat has not been modified or been selectively bred for the last 1,000 years. I know people who have gluten sensitivities who can eat wheat from his bread and be totally fine. So something about the way that, because if we look at it, like gluten sensitivity is increasing. Why is that? So what else is happening? Like, why are human beings suddenly becoming so, and when we talk about sensitivity, what we're talking about is there's actually particular proteins in gluten that trigger an immune reaction. So what's changed over the last 1,000 years? We've selectively bred wheat, right? Even the discovery of dwarf wheat is a Nobel Prize winning discovery because we conquered world hunger with the discovery of dwarf wheat. And so there's probably some kind of chemical change there that triggers some kind of immune reaction in some percentage of the population. So this low levels of inflammation also come from things like processed foods. Okay? And there's all kinds of other stuff. So like refined sugars will cause inflammation. All kinds of stuff causes inflammation, like the crap that we eat. Data's really unclear on how much stuff causes what percentage of inflammation in what percentage of human beings. So you've got some people who are like super, super into natural and anti-GMO and stuff like that. Think that GMO is the worst things in the world, right? Natural is better. And there's probably some evidence that some of that's true. Pasture raised is better than farm raised and this and that. Like there's probably some benefit to that, but we don't really know how much. But when it comes to the metabolic stuff, reducing these low levels of inflammation, so there are other things that we also know, like eating fresh fruits and vegetables, reduces inflammation. You may say, how does this reduce inflammation? It all has to do with gut bacteria. So the kinds of, so this is what's happened, okay? In a quick summary, 2-minute summary. So here's a human being, let's say 50,000 years ago. The human being has a certain diet. This is the diet of the human being 50,000 years ago. The human being develops a symbiotic relationship with bacteria. And we develop this relationship for 50,000 years because the bacteria helps us digest these things. And since we've lived with this bacteria for a very long time, our immune system thinks that this bacteria is a good dude. They're like, hey, these are friendly bacteria. We do not need to kill them. They're not threatening. Meanwhile, over here, there's another bacteria. And this bacteria causes, let's say this is anthrax. And anthrax hurts us. So when the immune system sees this is like, this is a bad dude, let's kill it. Now, as our diet changes to, let's say, just circles, we start to select for a different kind of bacteria. Because that's the bacteria that's the bacteria that can digest just the circles is going to grow in our gut. Now, the problem is that this bacteria is different from this bacteria. And our immune system looks at this and it's like, well, it's not really bad, but it's not very good. It's not a friend. It's like kind of sus. And then this leads to inflammation. So what we see is when people eat foods that we've been eating for a long time, it tends to reduce the inflammation in the gut. Okay? And so what this kind of comes down to, there's also other things. So exercise is not something that we talked about, but exercise affects insulin metabolism in a very positive way, sugar metabolism. So it sort of fixes this. It also affects the kind of food that we crave. Right? So I'll ask y'all a question. You know, who here likes to have a milkshake with a burger and fries? If you enjoy having a milkshake with a burger and fries, raise your hand. Who here, whenever they exercise for an hour, craves a milkshake at the end of the hour? Right? When you exercise, what kind of stuff do you crave? You can feel really, really, really hungry. Most people just want to drink water. Right? So exercise helps with all this stuff too. So if y'all are tired, couple things, like what do we do if we're tired? The first thing is pay attention to insulin. So this is also where like complex carbohydrates, so eating a cookie and eating like a piece of fruit is going to be different. Because complex carbohydrates have something called a lower glycemic index, which is the amount of insulin that is released in response to this food. So if I eat an apple, this is actually not going to lead to a very big insulin spike. If I eat a grape, that's going to lead to more insulin release. If I eat a cookie, that's going to release even more insulin. And if I eat a white flour cracker, like not whole wheat flour cracker, that'll lead to more insulin. So generally speaking, the higher the glycemic index your diet is, the more tired you will feel. Number one. So you can also do intermittent fasting or ketogenic diet. Sometimes people will do both, whatever. And now we understand why these things will make people less tired. Other thing is like eat fruits and veggies. So, because fruits and veggies have a really interesting thing. When you eat high fiber diets, what ends up happening is, I don't know if this kind of makes sense, but if you're starving and you eat an apple, you're no longer starving, but you're still kind of hungry, but you can't really gorge yourself. Right? So like if I'm really, really starving, and I don't know if this kind of makes sense to y'all. If I'm starving, if you give me 1,500 calories that is packed very densely, I can eat them if I'm like really, really hungry. But if you give me an apple first, and let's say an apple is, let's say like 180 calories, let's call it 200 calories. After eating the apple, I'm not going to eat a 1,300 calorie meal. I'm going to eat like a 700 calorie meal. Does that make sense? Oh, GaRL is rating with a party of 279. Thanks for the raid, girl. We're talking about metabolism. I don't know if it's the most exciting topic. Is it 200? So that's a good question. So this is another thing. There's so much to learn. So that's because our hunger. So people are asking, okay, why does an apple make you feel full if it's not only calories? So our perception of hunger is an integration of all kinds of circuits. So it's an integration of our blood sugar, but it's also an integration of things like mass in the stomach. This is via stretch receptors. So even like how much our belly is stretched and how much weight is in there correlates with our hunger. So this is why people will talk about rice cakes is pretty filling. They're super low calorie, but they have some volume. I don't know how much they actually create stretch in your stomach, so I'm not really sure if this is a great example. But like if you eat some low calorie dense food that has a lot of volume, you can't eat very much of it. Like you can eat 1,500 calories in one burger, but I don't know that you can eat like 1,500 calories of broccoli, right? Like you just can't do, it's like physically, like you're not going to feel hungry. It'll be like 8 heads, like you're just going to, the stretch receptors are going to be like enough. Does that make sense? There are also different kinds of hormones at play here. like ghrelin and leptin. So if you're tired, pay attention to the glycemic index of stuff. By all means, reduce your carbohydrate intake or be careful when you eat. So another thing, going back to this, and I'll kind of integrate this. So let's kind of like integrate all this stuff. So let's say that you wake up at 5 a.m. So usually when I wake up first thing in the morning, I don't eat something, because I find that if I eat something right away, I get an insulin spike and I'm not very productive. So if I wake up at 5 a.m., I'm going to go 2 hours. Maybe I'll have tea, but I'll go 2 hours without any food. Then I feel very hungry. So 7 to 8, I'll eat a meal, and I'll usually have a pretty heavy meal. So today, for example, I had 2 breakfast tacos. And the thing is, when I have 2 breakfast tacos, I know that I'm going to need enough calories. So I do this on purpose. So I know that, like, if I eat, well, actually, so today I woke up at 7. It's different with kids. So let's do this. Actually, let's stick with this. So if I eat at 8 o'clock, between 8 and 10 a.m., I'm not going to be very productive, because now I'm going to be digesting. So this is my digestion phase. So I'm not going to do much work. Then I'll kind of get a second wind. Sometimes I'll even take a nap here. So if I eat, I'll share with y'all an interesting technique. One of the best ways to avoid after meal fatigue is to lay down on your left side for 20 minutes. So I'll lay down, like, after I'll try to have a decently heavy meal. I'll lay down on my left side for about 20 minutes and close my eyes. Often, maybe I'll doze a little bit. I won't actually sleep. So let's say 10:30, I wake up. Then I'm going to do some kind of like random work between 10 and 4. This is going to be stuff like meetings, emails, other kinds of like low cognitive activity work. And then between 4 and 7, or sometimes between 7 and 9, here, sometimes I'll do more creative work, like I'll do writing or whatever, and then it's bedtime. So the key thing about like maintaining your energy level throughout the day is like this afternoon crash is oftentimes, if you don't eat enough for breakfast and you're starving at noon and you eat very heavy at noon, you're going to have an afternoon crash. You're going to have an afternoon crash. Why? So there are 3 reasons why you have the afternoon crash. Number 1, we're hungry. Because rushed in the morning. I'm rushed in the morning. Reason number 2, had caffeine in the morning, right? I wake up, I have my cup of coffee. It's an appetite suppressant. Right? And 4 hours later, the caffeine starts to wear off a little bit. So not only do we like start to feel that tiredness, but then this appetite suppressant makes us even more hungry. And then we eat a really big meal. So this plus this equals big meal. Once we have a big meal, big insulin spike. Makes us feel tired. Then what happens is now, let's say 2 hours later, so 6 hours post caffeine, the caffeine's really starting to wear off. So this is going to make me tired. And on top of that, it's now 2 p.m. And what do the monkeys do at 2? On top of that, roll in circadian rhythm. You're going to be more tired. This is why people crash in the afternoon. Right? Because everything aligns. And so if you're saying, okay, I'm tired in the afternoon, what should I do? Well, you can do all kinds of stuff. One is you can just take a nap. Second thing you can do is eat something with your coffee. Third thing you can do is cut back on your caffeine intake. Fourth thing you can do is when you eat a big meal, make sure it's low carb. Fifth thing you can do is have a snack at 10 a.m. so that you're not starving when noon comes around. Sixth thing that you can do, and I don't know if you all have done this, is have more coffee. Right? So I know we covered a lot of stuff. And unfortunately, like, that's, if you're tired, it's not simple. So if you think about what is the feeling of tiredness, the feeling of tiredness is an amalgamation of all kinds of mental and physiologic signals. Insulin, leptin, ghrelin, inflammation, glycogen stores, fat stores, circadian rhythm stuff. There's stuff going on in your brain in your reticular activating formation that is causing you to lay down or calm down or feel tired. Your vagus nerve is active or inactive depending on what's going on. Even the way that you breathe will affect your fatigue level. And so people are struggling with tired. Everyone's more tired. Why is that? When I work with people, I tend to split into two buckets. There's the circadian stuff, which has to do with your body's natural rhythms and how we may not be aligned with those kinds of natural rhythms. How if we get interrupted sleep or if we don't sleep enough or if we sleep too much, how we'll be tired the next day. And in the most unlucky cases, what we're talking about is actual pathology like sleep apnea. So the circadian stuff is kind of like sleep. But then there's another whole piece to this, which is metabolism, which is our actual energy level. And how our level of fatigue throughout the day is going to be dictated by all these different kinds of metabolic hormones and sugar balances and stuff like that, which is why everyone will say like, oh, I cut out gluten and now I feel so much more energetic. I'm doing keto. I'm doing intermittent fasting. I feel so much better. I feel so much better. I feel so much better. And there are all kinds of physiologic reasons for that. And so what everyone is doing is they're saying like, okay, so which one of these should I do? Should I do keto? Should I do intermittent fasting? Should I cut out dairy? Like, should I become vegan? Should I get one of those little watch things that monitors my sleep level? What should I do? Should I take melatonin? Should I take this supplement? Should I drink more coffee? Should I drink less coffee? Should I drink a special kind of coffee? Should I drink more expensive coffee? Everyone's wondering, like, how do we do this stuff? Like, what's the right answer? And I don't know how to say this, but like, if any of that stuff worked super, super, super well, it would eliminate everything else from the market. Right? Like, that's what happened with antibiotics. If you look at like the alternative medicine that's out there, there's very little alternative medicine for the stuff that we do really well with regular medicine. Right? Like, even people who are super into alternative medicine, like these are a lot of my patients. If they get sick, they'll take a course of antibiotics because it works really well. So there's a really interesting principle from the history of medicine that when there is one treatment that works, if you have 10 treatments for something, all of them don't work well. When you have one treatment that exists, that's because it works really well. It's just Darwinian. It's like the theory of evolution and natural selection. So you have all these 1,000 diets. And which one should you do? It comes down to these factors. It's not about one diet. It's not like this one is the thing that works. They all work to some degree. The question is, which one fits for you? What's your particular pattern of tiredness? Are you tired first thing in the morning when you wake up? What's your caffeine consumption like? Do you crash in the afternoon? Do you really hit your stride at 7 p.m.? Because the more that you understand yourself, the more that you'll be able to leverage any of these individual things and figure out what kind of plan works well for you. Questions? Man, so many questions. Too much information? Tell me about it. So that's why, like, this isn't a talk about what the information is. This is a talk about how to navigate the information. Do I recommend anything for mid-afternoon slumps? Honestly, if I had to make a recommendation for a mid-afternoon slump, take a nap. So here's another general idea, which is that don't fight what your body's telling you to do. So people are saying, how long do you nap? Remember, once again, it's about sleep cycles. So what I tend to find is that I can nap for less than half an hour or 2 hours, and both of those feel good. If I nap for an hour and a half, I'm going to wake up groggy. If I nap for 4 hours, I'm going to wake up groggy. Aslan27 is saying, how do I prevent afternoon slumps? You can absolutely avoid big meals, or you can avoid caffeine in the morning. That'll make a big difference. How do you time nap for 30 minutes when it takes a dynamic amount of minutes to fall asleep? Well, you learn how to sleep in a non-dynamic way. Right? So in my case, one of two things will happen. So I'm going to lay down for 30 minutes and then I'm going to get up after a 30-minute timer. So however much sleep I get during that is fine. So one thing is, if you get used to it, your body will like nap more easily. And the second thing that you can do, so oftentimes what I'll do when I nap is I'll listen to an audiobook, which puts me in like this weird, like half conscious state. And then my body gets used to like falling asleep to the audiobook. So that's how and then the other thing is that you don't, when I say nap for 30 minutes, the right thing there is that after 30 minutes, if I haven't fallen asleep, I'll get out of bed. Right? So like if I'm going to rest for 30 minutes. I'm going to keep my eyes closed for 30 minutes in a bed. If sleep comes, sleep comes. If it doesn't come, then I'm just going to get up because there's no point in being in bed if I'm not going to fall asleep. I use a speaker when possible. Are night shift workers just screwed? Not exactly. So we do know that there's data that shows that night shift workers tend to have like worse health outcomes. So we know it's probably not like healthy to be a night shift worker. It doesn't mean that you're like screwed. But we know that like cardiovascular disease, for example, is worse in night shift workers. But some people, remember, depending on your circadian rhythm, like are more suited to work at night. And I think that a lot of the downsides of night shift work can be mitigated by different kinds of interventions. So for example, like if you're a night shift worker, one thing that you need to make sure you do is get vitamin D. So if you don't get sun exposure, you need to get it from a pill form, for example. So if you're trying to nap but only start napping at 20 minutes, do you sleep for 1 hour added to that 20 minutes? No. Usually when I set a nap for 30 minutes, I will set a certain amount of time and then I will get out of bed after that time, even if I don't fall asleep. Because remember that it's not just sleep, right? So if my parasympathetic nervous system is active and my body is telling me, hey, we're tired, we don't really want to think, I'm just not going to think. I'm going to lay down and close my eyes. If sleep doesn't claim me because I've got enough caffeine in my system, then I still rest. And I shut down my body. I let my blood flow go to my digestive system, which will speed up the digestion. And then when I get out of bed in 45 minutes, I'll feel better. Okay. Why do you lay on the left side? I don't have a great physiologic reason, but in the yogic stuff, they just say you should lay on the left because it activates your surya, which is the opposite of your parasympathetic nervous system. So it like counterbalances it's surya nadi activation, tech teller. So it'll like balance it. So what time to bed if you wake up at 5? So back when I was in med school, right before I had kids and stuff, I would sleep around between 8 and 9 and wake up between 4 and 4:30. Now what I follow is largely dependent on the children, right? So once you get kids, it changes. Is it normal to be groggy after a nap? Does it ever go away? It is. It can be normal to be groggy after a nap. Part of that depends a lot on the length of the nap. So in my case, I can nap for less than 30 minutes and not be groggy, and nap 2 hours or more and not be groggy. But if I nap for like 75 minutes, I'm groggy when I wake up. I see someone's keeps on asking one question. I don't know what is DSPS, delayed sleep phase syndrome. Is that what you're referring to? I don't know. What is NSDR protocols? I'm just Googling the stuff. Non-sleep. I don't know. It sounds like NDSR is a new. Yeah, I was gonna say it sounds like yoga nidra. So this is something that's happening. There's like some weird cultural appropriation going on, where we're like taking these old yogic practices and we're like giving them fancy new scientific names, which has some validity to it. But some of it's like kind of weird. It's like, this is yoga nidra. Like, mindfulness is meditation. And cardiac coherence breathing is another good example of it's not Ishuddhi pranayam. It's had a name for 5,000 years. And so if it's yoga nidra is great. So I think Huberman's good, dude. Like, I think he does a very good job of translational research. So he takes a lot of like basic science stuff and makes it very applicable. So the thing, yoga nidra is actually not designed to help you sleep. It should be done about half an hour or 45 minutes before sleep. Okay, let's meditate for a few minutes. Yoga nidra is a technique of yogic, it's called yogic sleep, but it's a technique that cultivates a level of consciousness that is between sleeping and waking. Can we do yoga nidra? We don't have time to do yoga nidra today. It's usually like a 20-minute practice. Because I think we've got Ask a Coach in 5 minutes, right? So what we're going to do is do a quick meditation, NIDRA, yoga nidra. If I'm not hungry, should I eat something anyway before a test? It depends on the length of the test. So that's a really interesting question. Is Yoga Nidra in the guide? Absolutely. So here's what I'd say about eating before a test. One is remember that if you have adrenaline from anticipation of the test, that's going to suppress your appetite. So you got to be careful, because if you've had that going for a while, you don't want to run out of energy during the test. At the same time, depending on the length of the test, if you eat a bunch before a test, you don't want the insulin spike to hit you in the middle of the test and make your brain reduce blood flow to the brain. So you got to be careful there too. So that's where I'd say it depends on the length of the test, but I like to have some kind of snack, like maybe an hour before a test. And like assuming it's like a 3-hour midterm or something, so that I'm not completely empty. And then I'm usually famished by the time I'm done with the exam, which is great because then I just go eat a huge meal. Is Yoga Nidra good for practicing lucid dreaming? I'm not sure, because I don't really understand lucid dreaming. So like the problem with lucid dreaming that I've seen is that a lot of people will talk about how to do it, but I haven't seen that it consistently works, that techniques consistently work for lucid dreaming. So some people will say like, this thing works for me. Other people will say this thing works for me. Some people will say none of this stuff works for me. So I don't know. So I'm not quite sure. Like I understand what lucid dreaming is supposed to be, but I'm just not sure. Chronosaurus is saying, whenever I do mindfulness or meditation, I don't feeling uncomfortable sensations, or it sounds like you are feeling uncomfortable sensations. So I would say it depends on the technique. Okay, let's do a quick meditation. I have tried Qigong. What kind of meditation do y'all want to do today? It's so someone's asking, how do I fix my sleep schedule? We can do Bhastrika or Kapalbhati. That's fine. What do y'all want to do? So let's redo part 1. So we need to practice part 1 because part 1's can be uncomfortable. So we're going to do the preparatory practice for an emotional digestion meditation. Okay? So what we're going to do, sit up straight, neck straight, back straight, head straight. And what I'm going to do is breathe in and out through pursed lips. So I'll breathe like this. But while I have a full breath of air, as I breathe in, I'm going to expand my stomach. And then when I have a full breath of air, I'm going to roll my stomach around. So I'm going to contract my abdominal muscles. So first I'm going to push them out. Then I'm going to pull them to the right, like I'm trying to dodge. Or sorry, pull them to the left, like I'm trying to dodge, although we want to keep our spine straight. So you just want to move the belly. Then we're going to pull them back towards our spine, and then we're going to push our belly out the other way to the right. So we're going to move our belly in a circle over the course of a full breath, right? So we're going to breathe in. Then when we have a full breath of air, we're going to move our belly around. Then we're going to slowly breathe out. Okay? Okay, if you can roll from top to bottom, that's fine too. Just move it around. Okay? So sit up straight and let's begin. We'll do 3 breaths. And now roll. And out. Breathe in. And then roll. And out. And in. Roll. And out. So that's that's quick technique. How do y'all feel? It's hard, right? Yeah, that's why we're doing just 3 breaths. So oftentimes if you do like way too many, it'll start to feel really uncomfortable. Is it okay to yawn? Sure. Feels like I do more a rectangle. It can be like that. That's fine. You can do a rectangle. So remember that if you're doing a rectangle, keep doing a rectangle. And then after you do a rectangle, then do an octagon. You'll be able, once you get good at a rectangle, you can do an octagon. And then you'll be able to do a circle. Right? Yeah, so if you can I explain the stomach movement more. So you can contract one side of your abdominal muscles. So like, I don't know if this kind of makes sense, but you can pull your belly button in a particular direction. It doesn't have to go straight back, right? You have abdominal muscles that I feel like I'm doing it with my mouth at the same time. I can't not do it with my mouth. I can't talk and do that without, it's so weird. It's like my mouth wants to do it. So you can pull your belly out in different ways. Right? It's really weird though if you're talking. I can't isolate the two. It's like, ah. Maybe it helps do the mouthpiece too. Be like, ah, 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 ah. Right? Oh, yeah. And it's weird because my mouth is moving opposite to my belly. So practice that. So I'd say you can do like work your way up to maybe doing it for 5 minutes a day. And then we'll share a different technique with y'all, kind of step 2 of the technique, maybe on Friday, maybe on Monday. So I want to give people a chance to like do this for a week. Okay? Rikai Faf is like, oh God, it works. All right, so we're going to hop on over to Discord for Ask a Coach. Let me see. So we're going to be talking a little bit about anger today. Let's see who is the coach. I'm going to go on over.
As well. Just a few boundaries to set before we sort of go into the event. So even though this is an event with an HG coach, this is not coaching. Coaching is something that happens over a longer period of time. And in this event, we...
Looks like Ask a Coach is live. Why don't y'all hop on the Healthy Gamer server? You're welcome to join in. And we're going to be working with one of our awesome coaches today, who also is very well versed in mindfulness. So it'll be a treat. We'll see y'all there. And otherwise, we'll see y'all on Friday at standard stream time. Take care, everybody.